My name is Allison, and I'm 32 years old working as an art therapist in Boston. Christmas used to be magical for me until I turned 15 and everything changed. My family betrayed me in the most devastating way, leaving me behind for a luxury Christmas cruise. I'll never forget my stepmother's cruel words that the cabin was too nice to waste on me. That abandonment taught me painful lessons about family worth and what real love means. Before I share my story, where are you watching from? If you've ever felt invisible to your own family, hit subscribe and join me on this journey. I was born into what seemed like a perfect family. My childhood memories are filled with laughter, warmth, and the smell of my mother's famous snickerdoodle cookies baking in our small but cozy kitchen in suburban Massachusetts. My father worked as a software engineer, and my mother was an elementary school teacher who loved her job almost as much as she loved me. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough, and more importantly, we had each other. Every Christmas was special. Mom would spend weeks planning decorations, baking cookies, and wrapping presents in newspapers she had saved all year to be environmentally conscious. Dad would carry me on his shoulders to place the star on top of our modest tree. Those were simple times, but I felt so loved, so secure. Everything changed when I was 9 years old. My mother was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. I watched her fade away over the course of 8 months, her vibrant spirit diminishing with each round of chemotherapy. I still remember sitting by her hospital bed, drawing pictures that I hoped would make her smile, even as tubes and machines beeped around us. The day she died, my father and I held her hands. She looked at me with those eyes that somehow still sparkled despite everything, and said, "Allison, my sweet girl, remember that love never truly leaves. It just changes form." I didn't understand what she meant then, but those words would return to me years later when I needed them most. After Mom died, Dad tried his best. For 2 years, it was just the two of us, navigating our grief together. He learned to braid my hair, though never quite mastered it, attempted to bake Mom's recipes, burning more than a few batches, and sat through elementary school concerts, looking both proud and heartbroken that Mom wasn't there to see me. We were struggling, but healing together, preserving Mom's traditions as best we could, especially at Christmas. Then Jennifer entered our lives. Dad met her at a work function, and suddenly our quiet routine was disrupted by this glamorous marketing executive with her designer clothes and strong opinions. Jennifer was everything my mother wasn't: loud, ambitious, status conscious, and very clear about what she wanted. What she wanted, apparently, was my father and the stability he represented. I tried to like her. I really did. I was 11 when they started dating, old enough to understand Dad was lonely, young enough to hope for a mother figure. But Jennifer never tried to be my mother. From the beginning, she treated me like an obligation, a package deal she had to accept to get to my father. When Dad proposed after just 8 months of dating, our lives changed dramatically. Jennifer moved into our home with her 13-year-old twin sons, Jack and Thomas, and immediately began redecorating, removing many of Mom's touches that Dad and I had preserved. Our modest home wasn't enough for her tastes, so within months, we moved to a much larger house in an upscale neighborhood. The twins were identical in appearance, but opposite in personality. Jack was competitive and manipulative, quick to establish dominance in our new family hierarchy. Thomas was quieter, more thoughtful, though he generally followed his brother's lead. They shared a bond that I, as the outsider, could never penetrate. I tried so hard to fit in with my new family. I offered to help Jennifer with dinner, asked about her day, and attempted to join the twins' video game sessions. My efforts were met with Jennifer's thin smiles and the twins' reluctant inclusion. Dad noticed nothing amiss. So grateful was he for this second chance at happiness. Or perhaps he simply chose not to see. The signs of favoritism were subtle at first. The twins got new smartphones, while I was told my 2-year-old model was perfectly fine. Their bedrooms were redecorated to their specifications, while mine remained untouched. When I achieved straight A's, Jennifer would nod dismissively. But when the boys got B's, Dad would take everyone out for celebration dinners. Christmas changed too. The handmade ornaments Mom and I had crafted together were deemed tacky by Jennifer and relegated to a box in the attic. Our artificial tree was replaced by a perfect 12-foot specimen delivered and decorated by professionals. The modest gifts of my childhood were supplanted by expensive electronics and designer clothes, at least for the twins and Jennifer. My gifts became increasingly practical store gift cards and winter coats that Jennifer selected without my input. Through it all, Dad grew more distant. His focus shifted to pleasing Jennifer, building his career, to support our new lifestyle and bonding with the twins, through golf and fishing trips to which I was rarely invited. When I tried to talk to him about feeling excluded, he would ruffle my hair and say, "Don't be so sensitive, alley cat." The nickname from my childhood now felt hollow, a relic of a relationship that was fading. I turned to art and academics for solace. My sketchbook became my confidant, filled with increasingly dark and complex drawings that my art teacher praised while giving me concerned glances. I studied obsessively, knowing that education was my ticket to eventual freedom. But alone in my room, surrounded by the trappings of wealth that brought no comfort, I would often take out the photo of Mom I kept hidden in my desk drawer and wonder if love really did just change form, or if it could simply disappear. As my 14th Christmas with the new family approached, I made one last attempt to recreate some of Mom's traditions. I suggested we make handmade ornaments and bake cookies together. Jennifer dismissed the idea with a laugh. "We're not living in a Hallmark movie, Allison. The caterers are handling the holiday party." That year, I sat in a corner during the lavish holiday party Jennifer threw for Dad's colleagues and her social circle, watching my family perform their roles in a play where I was merely an extra. The twins charmed adults with rehearsed jokes, Jennifer dazzled in an expensive gown, and Dad beamed with pride at his perfect family. No one seemed to notice I was wearing the same dress from last year that barely fit, or that I hadn't spoken more than a few words all evening. It was then that I began to understand that in Jennifer's production of family life, I was an unwelcome reminder of Dad's previous happiness, a loose thread in the tapestry she was weaving. I didn't fit the image she was creating, and increasingly, Dad seemed to share her vision. That Christmas, as I unwrapped practical gifts while the twins received the latest gaming console, I felt the last threads connecting me to my father beginning to fray. Little did I know that the following year would bring a betrayal so complete that those threads would snap entirely, leaving me adrift and alone during what was once the most magical time of the year. The summer before I turned 15, I began to notice whispered conversations between Jennifer and my father. They would abruptly stop when I entered a room, replacing their secretive tones with artificial casualness. "Just discussing boring adult stuff," Dad would say with a forced smile. Jennifer would simply watch me with that calculating look I had come to recognize, like she was solving a problem, and I was the problem. At first, I thought they might be having marriage problems. Part of me, the part I wasn't proud of, hoped they might divorce, and life could return to the simpler days with just Dad and me. But as summer turned to fall, I overheard phrases like "special family surprise" and "Christmas to remember." Despite my growing wariness of Jennifer and her influence on our family, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this would be the Christmas when things would change. Perhaps Dad had finally noticed my increasing isolation and was planning something to make me feel included again. I began making extra efforts around the house, doing chores without being asked, helping with dinner, even when Jennifer made it clear my assistance wasn't needed. I wanted to deserve whatever this surprise might be, to remind my father that I was still his daughter, still worthy of consideration. One October afternoon, while looking for a stapler in Dad's home office, I discovered a glossy brochure hidden beneath some paperwork. "Caribbean Christmas Cruise" proclaimed the cover, featuring a massive luxury liner against a backdrop of turquoise waters. I flipped through images of lavish buffets, elegant staterooms, and tropical excursions. My initial excitement quickly gave way to unease when I noticed Jennifer had circled a family package deal for 4 people. 4, not 5. The family was Dad, Jennifer, and the twins. There was no space allocated for me in this plan. I carefully replaced the brochure exactly as I'd found it, my hands trembling slightly. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. Perhaps they were just gathering information, or maybe there was a separate teen program I would be part of. Dad wouldn't exclude me from a family Christmas vacation. He couldn't be that blind to what Jennifer was doing. As November arrived, I channeled my anxiety into creating handmade Christmas gifts. I spent hours in the school art room after classes crafting a set of personalized watercolor paintings for each family member. For Dad, I painted our old house with Mom's garden in full bloom. For the twins, scenes from the video games they loved. For Jennifer, despite everything, a sophisticated abstract piece in the colors she preferred. Art was my language, and I hoped these gifts might speak to them in ways my words couldn't seem to penetrate. Meanwhile, the family's secretiveness intensified. Jennifer started taking mysterious shopping trips and returning with bags she wouldn't let me see. The twins exchanged knowing glances at dinner and made cryptic comments about the best Christmas ever, while looking at me with a mixture of smugness and pity that turned my stomach. One evening in early December, I tried to help Jennifer wrap some gifts. She quickly covered whatever she was working on and said, "Don't you have homework or something? This doesn't concern you." The dismissal stung, but it was the flash of something in her eyes that frightened me. Was it guilt? No. Jennifer never felt guilty about how she treated me. It was more like satisfaction, the look of someone who has set a trap and is watching their prey walk into it. I found Dad alone the next day and confronted him directly. "Dad, is something going on with Christmas this year? Everyone's being really secretive." He avoided meeting my eyes, focusing instead on his laptop screen. "Just the usual holiday stuff, Alley Cat. Nothing to worry about." "Are we going somewhere for Christmas, like a trip or something?" I pressed. His fingers paused over the keyboard. "Everything will be fine, Allison. Trust me." He finally looked at me, his expression a mix of discomfort and what might have been guilt. But whatever moment of truth might have occurred was interrupted by Jennifer calling him from downstairs. And the conversation was over. At school, I was working on a final project for my art class, a mixed media piece about family. While other students created idealized portraits or cheerful collages, I found myself creating a triptych showing a girl progressively fading from a family photo becoming transparent, until in the final panel, she was just an outline present but unseen. My art teacher, Ms. Reyes, stood behind me for a long time, before quietly asking if I wanted to talk. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. That weekend, I confided in my only close friend, Marissa. We sat in her bedroom surrounded by the normal teenage chaos of posters and clothes that felt so different from my own carefully ordered space at home. "They're definitely planning something without you," she agreed after I shared my suspicions. "That's seriously messed up." "Maybe I'm wrong," I said, voicing the hope I clung to despite mounting evidence. "Maybe there's another explanation." Marissa gave me a look of such pity that I had to look away. "Just promise you'll call me on Christmas whatever happens," she said, squeezing my hand. "My family's loud and crazy, but there's always room for one more." A week before Christmas, my father's sister, Aunt Patricia, arrived for what she called an extended holiday visit. Aunt Patricia had always been kind to me, but her relationship with Jennifer was strained at best. She was my mother's college roommate before becoming family through marriage, and she had never hidden her opinion that Dad had remarried too quickly. To my surprise, Aunt Patricia began paying special attention to me, bringing me hot chocolate in the evenings and asking about my art projects. She seemed to be watching the family dynamics with increasingly narrowed eyes. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I came home from school to find luggage being brought down from the attic. Jennifer was directing the twins to check if their passports were current, stopping abruptly when she noticed me standing in the doorway. "Passports?" I asked, my voice small but steady. "Why do we need passports for Christmas?" Jennifer exchanged a look with Jack, who smirked slightly before heading upstairs. Thomas at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Your father will explain everything tonight," Jennifer said, her tone making it clear the conversation was over. That night, my world collapsed with a few carefully orchestrated words delivered in our living room with clinical precision. "We have an exciting announcement." My father began, his arm around Jennifer as they stood before me. The twins sat on the couch opposite, already grinning in anticipation. I remained standing, sensing what was coming, but unable to brace myself for the impact. "This Christmas, we're doing something special," Jennifer continued, taking control of the narrative, as she always did. "We've booked a 7-day Caribbean cruise leaving on December 23rd. For one beautiful, naive moment, I felt relief. Finally, the secret was out. Despite my concerns, I was included in this family adventure. I began to imagine tropical beaches, a break from the cold Massachusetts winter, perhaps even a chance to reconnect with Dad, away from the daily routines that had driven us apart. "We've been planning this for months," Dad added, smiling broadly. "The ship is amazing. There's a rock climbing wall, water slides, 5 different restaurants." "When do we leave?" I asked, already mentally calculating what I would need to pack. A heavy silence fell. Jennifer's smile never faltered, but something cold entered her eyes. Dad's enthusiasm dimmed, replaced by discomfort. The twins exchanged glances. "Well, that's the thing, Allison," Jennifer said, her voice taking on the artificially patient tone she used when explaining something she considered obvious. "The family package we booked is for 4 people." "I don't understand," I said, though I was beginning to each word falling like ice into my stomach. "You'll be staying with Mrs. Wilson next door while we're gone," Dad finally said, not quite meeting my eyes. "She's very excited to have you. We already arranged everything." Mrs. Wilson was our elderly neighbor who lived alone with her 3 cats. She was kind, but frail, someone you'd ask to collect your mail during a weekend away, not someone you'd abandon your child with during Christmas. "But it's Christmas," I said stupidly, as if they might have forgotten this fact. "We've never spent Christmas apart." "There will be other Christmases," Jennifer said dismissively. "The cruise line only had 4-person cabins available when we booked. We couldn't get you your own cabin. They were all sold out." "We'll bring you back something nice," Jack added with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And we'll take lots of pictures," Thomas said, at least having the grace to look uncomfortable. "Why can't I come? We could have found a different cruise or a different vacation where we all could go," I said, my voice rising slightly with desperation. "This cruise has everything we wanted," Jennifer replied. "The itinerary is perfect, and honestly, Alice in the cabin is too nice to waste on you when you'd probably just sit around drawing in your sketchbook the whole time anyway." The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked to my father, waiting for him to defend me, to object to this characterization of his daughter as unworthy of a nice cabin of a family Christmas. He said nothing. He looked at the floor, then at the wall, then briefly at me with an expression of helpless apology that somehow hurt worse than Jennifer's casual cruelty. "It'll go by fast," he finally offered weakly. "And next time we'll plan something that works for everyone." But there was something in his avoidance, in the way he shifted his weight, that told me there had never been an attempt to include me. This exclusion was not an unfortunate circumstance, but a deliberate choice. I stood there, surrounded by my family, and felt a strange calm descend. I had expected to cry, to scream, to beg. Instead, I felt nothing but a profound stillness, as if my emotions had reached such a peak that they circled back to emptiness. "When do you leave?" I asked, my voice steady. Jennifer seemed almost disappointed by my composed reaction. Perhaps she had wanted to see something that would justify her treatment of me. "The 23rd. We'll drive you to Mrs. Wilson's that morning before we head to the airport." The conversation continued around me, excited chatter about shore excursions, formal night outfits, and snorkeling opportunities. I stood in the center of the room, completely invisible, as my family planned their perfect Christmas without me. Later that night, I overheard a heated conversation between Aunt Patricia and my father in his office. I hadn't even realized she was in the house, having returned from some errands. "Are you out of your mind, David?" Aunt Patricia's normally controlled voice was raised in anger. "You're abandoning your daughter at Christmas to go on a cruise. What would Kate think?" Kate was my mother's name, rarely spoken in our house since Jennifer had arrived. "It's not abandonment," my father defended weakly. "Mez Wilson is very responsible, and it's just for a week." "Just for a week. Just for Christmas, you mean?" "The first holiday that mattered to Kate, that mattered to you and Allison. And don't give me that nonsense about the 4-person cabin. I called the cruise line myself this afternoon. They have plenty of options for 5 people. Jennifer fed you that lie, and you swallowed it because it was convenient." My breath caught in my throat. So it had been possible for me to come. They had chosen to leave me behind. "Patricia, you're overstepping," my father warned, his voice hardening. "This is my family now, and I get to decide what's best." "That girl up there is your family, your flesh and blood. Kate would be heartbroken to see how you've let that woman push her daughter aside." "Don't bring Kate into this. Jennifer is my wife now, and she what, David? She comes before your own child. Listen to yourself. I crept back to my room before I could hear my father's response, but I already knew what it would be. His silence earlier had said everything. In the new hierarchy of our home, I ranked below everyone else, below a cruise cabin that was too nice to waste on me. I sat on my bed, the silence in my room so complete, I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. For the first time since my mother died, I felt truly alone. I pulled out my sketchbook and began to draw black, jagged lines across white paper, my hand moving almost without conscious direction. By morning, I had filled pages with darkness and made a decision. If my silence was all I had left, I would make it louder than any scream could ever be. The morning of December 23rd arrived cold and gray, matching my mood perfectly. I had packed a small duffel bag with clothes, my sketchbook, and the few mementos of my mother I couldn't bear to leave behind. The rest of my Christmas break essentials were stuffed into my school backpack, including the gifts I had made for a family who didn't want me. Breakfast was a flurry of last-minute excitement that swirled around me like I was a rock in a stream present, but unmoved by the current. Jennifer checked and rechecked passports while the twins debated which pool on the ship they would try first. My father glanced at me occasionally, with what might have been guilt quickly masked by forced cheerfulness. "All set for Mrs. Wilson's alley cat?" he asked as he buttered his toast. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I had barely said a word since the announcement, responding to direct questions with minimal answers. My silence seemed to unnerve him more than any argument would have, which gave me a small, cold satisfaction. Aunt Patricia had left the previous evening after another argument with my father, this one conducted behind closed doors, but audible throughout the house. She had hugged me tightly before going, whispering, "This isn't right, Allison. Call me anytime." She pressed a slip of paper with her cell number into my hand, along with $100 bill. "Just in case," she added, her eyes conveying a message I couldn't quite decipher. At 10:30, we pulled into Mrs. Wilson's driveway. Her modest Cape Cod-style home was decorated with a simple wreath on the door, and lights strung somewhat haphazardly along the porch. It looked warm and inviting in a way our professionally decorated showpiece never could, but it wasn't home, and it wasn't where I should be spending Christmas. Mrs. Wilson greeted us at the door, her silver hair neatly styled, wearing a Christmas sweater, with a cat wearing a Santa hat. "Allison, I'm so looking forward to our time together," she said, her smile genuine, but her eyes showing concern as she took in my expressionless face. Dad carried my bag inside while Jennifer waited in the car with the twins, not even bothering to pretend this handoff was anything but an inconvenience delaying their vacation. In Mrs. Wilson's small living room, with its doilies and framed cat photos, Dad placed an envelope on the coffee table. "Emergency money and contact information," he explained to Mrs. Wilson. "Our ship number, the hotel before we board, everything you might need." He turned to me, awkwardly patting my shoulder. "Be good, okay? It's only a week. We'll do video calls when we get good Wi-Fi." I looked at him directly for the first time in days. "Have a nice cruise," I said, my voice flat. Something flickered in his eyes, discomfort or perhaps the faintest recognition of what he was doing. But Jennifer honked the car horn outside, and whatever moment might have occurred passed as quickly as it had come. "Merry Christmas, Allison," he said. And then he was gone, hurrying to his real family, the ones worth taking on a cruise. Mrs. Wilson patted my arm gently. "I made up the guest room for you, dear, and I thought we could bake cookies this afternoon. I know it's not the same as being with your family, but we'll try to make it nice." I nodded, following her up the narrow staircase to a small but clean room with flowered wallpaper and a patchwork quilt. Through the window I could see my father's car backing out of the driveway. No one looked back. That afternoon, I mechanically helped Mrs. Wilson bake chocolate chip cookies. She filled the silence with stories about her 3 cats, her late husband Frank, and Christmases from her childhood. I nodded at appropriate intervals, saying little. She didn't push, seeming to understand that my silence was a fragile dam holding back a flood. After dinner, I checked social media against my better judgment. Already, there were photos the family at the airport captioned, Christmas adventure begins, the twins mugging for the camera in matching Hawaiian shirts Jennifer had purchased. My father raising a glass in what looked like an airport bar. All of them smiling complete without me. I showed Mrs. Wilson how to use her ancient digital camera to take a photo of me holding one of her cats, which I then texted to Marissa with the message, "Guess who's not on a cruise for Christmas?" Her reply came immediately. "Those jerks come over tomorrow for dinner. Mom says you're welcome anytime." That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed with Mrs. Wilson's cat Ginger purring beside me, I cried for the first time since learning about the cruise. Not loud dramatic sobs, but silent tears that seemed to come from some deep hidden place inside me. I cried for the mother I had lost, the father who had chosen a new family over me, and the girl I had been before I understood how disposable I was. Christmas Eve dawned bright and clear, a perfect winter day that felt like an insult. Mrs. Wilson had put a small gift basket outside my door containing fuzzy socks, a chocolate Santa, and a handmade card. The kindness of this near stranger, compared to my own family's abandonment, made my chest ache. I spent the morning helping her prepare for a modest Christmas Eve dinner. Around noon, my phone pinged with notifications. More social media updates from the cruise, the family boarding the massive ship, their elegant cabin too nice for me, apparently the lunch buffet they were enjoying. In every photo, they looked happier than I'd seen them in months. My absence had improved their family dynamic, a realization that cut deeper than any cruel word Jennifer had ever said to me. That evening, I went to Marissa's house for dinner. Her large, chaotic family welcomed me with genuine warmth. Her parents hugged me tightly. Her younger siblings pulled me into their games, and no one mentioned my family's cruise except Marissa, who whispered, "Their loss seriously." For a few hours, surrounded by this functional, loving family, I felt almost normal. But watching Marissa's parents exchange affectionate looks across the table, seeing her father ruffle her hair the way my dad used to do with me, brought the contrast between our lives into sharp relief. After returning to Mrs. Wilson's, I retreated to the guest room and took out my sketchbook. That night, something changed in my art. Instead of the dark, jagged lines of recent months, I began drawing scenes of solitude that contained small moments of beauty: a girl alone on a beach at sunset, a solitary figure finding a perfect shell amid debris. There was still sadness in these images, but also a quieter acceptance, the first tentative steps toward understanding that my worth wasn't determined by Jennifer's assessment or even my father's neglect. Christmas morning at Mrs. Wilson's was a subdued affair. We exchanged small gifts. She had hurriedly purchased several items for me, after learning I would be staying while I gave her one of the watercolors I had originally painted for my aunt, ate cinnamon rolls, and watched old holiday movies on her ancient television. Around noon, a car pulled into the driveway. To my astonishment, Aunt Patricia stepped out carrying several packages. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," she said, hugging me tightly when Mrs. Wilson let her in. "I couldn't bear the thought of you alone today." "But you were supposed to be in Vermont with Uncle Rob's family," I said, confused but grateful. "Some things are more important," she replied simply, like being with my niece, who was abandoned by her father. She had brought real presents. Art supplies of much higher quality than I had ever owned, books I had mentioned wanting to read, and a beautiful journal bound in soft leather. "Your mother kept journals," she told me as I ran my fingers over the cover. She believed writing things down helped make sense of them, especially the hard things. Over hot chocolate in Mrs. Wilson's kitchen, Aunt Patricia revealed what had really been happening in our family. Jennifer had been systematically isolating my father and controlling the family finances. The cruise, it turned out, had been booked 9 months earlier, and the story about four-person cabins had been a complete fabrication. "She told your father that adding you would cost an extra $4,000, Aunt Patricia explained, anger evident in her normally gentle voice. In reality, it would have been less than $1,000. I checked, and they could easily have afforded it regardless. The manipulation was so calculated, so cruel, that it left me breathless. Why does she hate me so much? I asked the question that had haunted me for years, finally spoken aloud. Aunt Patricia sighed. "I don't think it's hate exactly. I think you represent something she can never be to your father. You're Kate's daughter, a living reminder of his first love. Instead of accepting that and finding her own place in his heart, she's tried to erase all evidence of his life before her. And Dad just lets her, I said bitterly. Your father is— She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. He's weak in ways I never recognized until now. He doesn't want to see what's happening because then he'd have to do something about it. But this— She gestured around, indicating my presence in Mrs. Wilson's house on Christmas Day. This goes beyond weakness. I told him I'm going to have a serious conversation with him when they return. I nodded, too emotionally exhausted to feel anything but a dull acceptance. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling the journal Aunt Patricia had given me open beside me. On the first page, I had written a promise to myself. Never again would I silence my needs or accept being treated as less than I deserved. If my own father couldn't see my worth, I would have to be the one to recognize and protect it. The cruise just seeped Kim docked on December 30th, and my family returned home the following day, their faces bronzed from the Caribbean sun, their luggage bulging with souvenirs. I had moved back home the previous evening, not wanting them to have the satisfaction of picking me up from Mrs. Wilson's like a forgotten package. I sat at the kitchen table sketching quietly when they burst through the door in a wave of excited chatter and tropical perfume. "Allison, we're back!" my father called, as if announcing a wonderful surprise. He approached with arms outstretched for a hug I didn't return. After an awkward moment, he let them drop. "How was your week with Mrs. Wilson?" "Fine," I replied, not looking up from my sketchbook. "We brought you something," he said, producing a small paper bag from his carry-on. Inside was a coral bracelet clearly purchased from a gift shop as an afterthought. The price tag was still attached to the back of the cardboard display card, $12.99. "Thanks," I said, placing it on the table without trying it on. Jennifer swept in, directing the twins to take their luggage upstairs. "Well, the house is still standing. I suppose that's something," she remarked, glancing around critically as if expecting to find disaster in her absence. "Mrs. Wilson's house was very well maintained, too," I replied quietly. Jennifer shot me a sharp look, but said nothing, moving to the refrigerator to inspect its contents instead. For the next several hours, I was subjected to detailed accounts of every aspect of their cruise: the towel animals left by room stewards, the midnight chocolate buffet, the dolphins they saw while snorkeling, the new friends the twins had made. Each story was another confirmation of the perfect family vacation I had been deemed unworthy to join. Thomas at least seemed uncomfortable with the constant reminders, occasionally glancing at me apologetically when particularly enthusiastic descriptions were shared. Jack, on the other hand, took special pleasure in elaborating on how awesome everything had been, his eyes flickering to me to ensure I understood just what I had missed. The twins proudly displayed the expensive electronics purchased during a port stop in St. Thomas, matching tablets that Jennifer explained were such a bargain with the duty-free discount. No one mentioned that the money saved could have easily paid for my ticket on the cruise. That night, alone in my room, I held my mother's photo and whispered, "They didn't even miss me, Mom." The realization was both painful and oddly freeing. I couldn't keep hoping for approval or inclusion from people who didn't value me. Something would have to change, but I wasn't yet sure what that change would look like. School resumed after New Year's, providing a welcome escape from the tension at home. I threw myself into my classes and art projects with renewed focus, staying late in the art room most days to avoid going home. Ms. Reyes noticed the shift in both my commitment and my artwork, commenting that my pieces showed an emerging voice that's both powerful and authentic. January passed in a blur of schoolwork and solitude. At home, I became expert at avoiding family interactions, limiting my presence in common areas, and responding to questions with minimal politeness. My father occasionally made awkward attempts at conversation, asking about school or offering to take me for ice cream like he used to when I was younger. I declined politely, but firmly each time. "You can't stay angry forever, Alley Cat," he said one evening, cornering me in the kitchen when I came down for a glass of water. "I'm not angry, Dad," I replied truthfully. "I'm just seeing things clearly now." He looked pained. "The cruise was just one vacation. We can plan something as a family for spring break somewhere you'd like to go." "By family, do you mean all of us or just the four of you again?" I asked, keeping my voice level. He flinched. That's not fair, Allison. There were circumstances. Circumstances that Aunt Patricia says weren't true, I interrupted. She called the cruise line Dad. They had plenty of options for 5 people. Color drained from his face. Patricia had no right to get involved. Someone had to, since you decided I wasn't worth fighting for. Jennifer chose that moment to enter the kitchen, instantly sensing the tension. Is everything all right? She asked, her tone suggesting she was more concerned about my father being upset than the actual situation. Allison is still dwelling on the cruise. My father explained, the words cutting through me like a knife. Still dwelling, as if my exclusion from a family Christmas was a minor inconvenience I should have already forgotten. Oh, for heaven's sake, Jennifer sighed dramatically. It was one vacation, Allison. Don't you think you're being a little dramatic? Some children have real problems, you know. Something snapped inside me. The careful control I had maintained for weeks evaporated in an instant. Being abandoned by your family at Christmas is a real problem, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Being told you're not worth including, that a cabin is too nice to waste on you, is a real problem. I never said, Jennifer began, but I cut her off. Yes, you did, those exact words. And I pointed at my father, said nothing, did nothing. Just like he's done nothing every time you've pushed me aside, made me feel unwelcome in my own home, turned my father against me. That's enough, my father said sharply. No, it's not enough, came a voice from the doorway. Aunt Patricia stood there, car keys in hand. She had been staying at a nearby hotel since the family's return, coming for dinner most evenings, despite Jennifer's obvious displeasure. It's nowhere near enough, David. This child has been suffering in silence while you pretended not to see. This doesn't concern you, Patricia, Jennifer snapped. My niece concerns me, Aunt Patricia replied firmly. And I'm done watching you destroy Kate's daughter while David stands by and lets it happen. The kitchen became a battlefield, with Jennifer defending her treatment of me as firm but fair. My father wavering between defensive justification and genuine shame, and Aunt Patricia methodically dismantling their excuses with specific examples of neglect and favoritism. The twins appeared at the commotion, Thomas hanging back with an expression of discomfort, while Jack took his place beside his mother, a united front against me. Throughout the argument, I remained silent, watching my father's face as the truth of the past few years was laid bare. I saw the moment when realization dawned, when he could no longer pretend he hadn't enabled the systematic pushing aside of his daughter. His shoulders slumped, and for a brief moment he looked like the grieving man he had been after my mother died, lost and afraid. I want to go with Aunt Patricia, I said quietly during a lull in the argument. All heads turned toward me. What did you say? My father asked, his voice barely audible. I want to stay with Aunt Patricia, I repeated more firmly. I can't be here anymore. Don't be ridiculous, Jennifer scoffed. You can't just decide to leave. Actually, she can, Aunt Patricia interjected. I've already spoken with my attorney. Given the circumstances, including the abandonment at Christmas, there's a strong case for a temporary guardianship arrangement. Abandonment? That's absurd. She was with a trusted neighbor, Jennifer protested, on Christmas, while you took the rest of the family on a luxury cruise, Aunt Patricia countered. A cruise line representative confirmed you specifically declined the family package that would have included her. Jennifer's face hardened. This is outrageous. David, are you going to let your sister threaten us like this? My father looked between Jennifer and me, conflict evident in his expression. Allison, we can work this out. You don't need to leave. I met his gaze steadily. When Jennifer said the cabin was too nice to waste on me, what did you say, Dad? He couldn't hold my eyes. I don't remember. You said nothing, I answered for him. You've been saying nothing for years while I disappeared from this family. I can't stay where I'm not wanted. Of course you're wanted, he protested weakly. When was the last time we did something together, just us? When was the last time you asked about my art or helped me with homework or just talked to me like I mattered? His silence was my answer. I'll get my things, I said, turning toward the stairs. This is emotional blackmail, Jennifer hissed. She's manipulating you, David. But as I walked away, I heard my father's voice quiet but clear. No, she's telling the truth. That night, I packed my essential belongings into 2 suitcases. Aunt Patricia waited patiently in the guest room where she had been staying, helping me decide what to take immediately and what could wait. My father appeared in the doorway several times, watching silently before drifting away again, unable or unwilling to articulate whatever he was feeling. As I placed my mother's photo carefully in my backpack, Thomas appeared in my doorway. Unlike his brother, who had remained firmly by Jennifer's side throughout the evening's drama, Thomas had kept his distance. "I'm sorry," he said simply, "about the cruise and everything else." I nodded, acknowledging his apology without fully accepting it. "Why now?" I asked. He shrugged uncomfortably, I guess seeing it from the outside. When Aunt Patricia laid it all out like that, it sounded really bad. And it was really bad, wasn't it? Yeah, I agreed. It was. "Are you coming back?" he asked. I folded a sweater carefully before answering. "I don't know." He nodded as if this was the answer he had expected, then disappeared down the hall. The next morning I left with Aunt Patricia. My father stood in the driveway looking lost and older than his 45 years. At the last moment he tried to embrace me, but I stepped back. "I need time," I said. He nodded, his eyes filled with tears that might have moved me a month earlier, but now seemed too little too late. "I'll fix this alley cat. Somehow." As we drove away, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I was moving toward something rather than being left behind. Living with Aunt Patricia was like learning to breathe again after years of slowly suffocating. Her townhouse in a nearby suburb was nothing like the showcase home Jennifer had created, but it was warm, comfortable, and most importantly, I was welcome there. Aunt Patricia had converted her home office into a bedroom for me, apologizing for the smaller space, even as I assured her it was perfect. The best part was the corner she had set up as a small art studio, complete with a drawing table, proper lighting, and supplies of much higher quality than I had ever owned. "Your mother was artistic too," she told me as I examined the setup in wonder. "Not in the same way you are, but she had a creative spirit. She would be so proud of your talent." We quickly established routines that worked for both of us. Aunt Patricia worked as a professor at the local university teaching literature courses. That kept her busy, but allowed her flexibility. I transferred to a public school closer to her home where no one knew me as the girl whose mother died, or the awkward stepsister of the Matthews twins. I could simply be Allison, the new girl who was good at art. The first few weeks were an adjustment. I had trouble sleeping, plagued by dreams of being left behind or forgotten. I was hypervigilant about not being a burden to Aunt Patricia, cleaning up after myself obsessively, and offering to contribute to groceries with the money she gave me as an allowance. "Allison," she said gently one evening, finding me scrubbing an already spotless kitchen counter at 10 p.m. "You don't have to earn your place here. You are wanted and welcome exactly as you are." I broke down then, sobbing into her shoulder as she held me, finally releasing the grief and hurt I had been carrying for years. It was the first of many conversations where she helped me understand that what had happened wasn't my fault, that I deserved better, and that it was okay to be angry and hurt by my father's choices. My father attempted contact regularly, first through daily phone calls that I let go to voicemail, then through texts asking how I was doing, and finally through supervised visits arranged by Aunt Patricia. These meetings were awkward, with my father alternating between defensive justification and genuine remorse. "Jennifer's seeing a therapist now," he told me during one such visit held at a neutral coffee shop. "She's working on her issues with trying to erase your mother through you." "And you?" I asked, stirring my hot chocolate without looking at him. "I'm seeing someone too," he admitted. "I've been trying to understand how I let things get so bad, how I failed you so completely." "I needed you to choose me sometimes," I said instead. "Not always, not over everything, just sometimes to show me I mattered too." He nodded, eyes damp. "I know that now. I knew it then too, I think, but it was easier to pretend everything was fine." to believe Jennifer when she said you were just being difficult or oversensitive. And the cruise, I couldn't help asking, the wound still fresh months later. His face crumpled with shame. There's no excuse. None. I let myself be convinced that you wouldn't enjoy it anyway, that it was too much money for someone who wouldn't appreciate it. I knew it was wrong, Alley Cat. I think that's why I couldn't look at you afterward. I couldn't face what I'd done. While my father seemed genuinely remorseful, Jennifer was a different story. Aunt Patricia allowed her to accompany my father to one meeting, which quickly devolved into Jennifer portraying herself as the victim of my unreasonable expectations and teenage drama. When she referred to the cruise incident as blown completely out of proportion, Aunt Patricia ended the meeting immediately. The twins reacted differently to my absence. Jack, always his mother's son, rarely came to the supervised visits, and when he did, maintained that I was overreacting to normal family stuff. Thomas, however, began reaching out independently first, through cautious texts and later through occasional visits, where he would bring me updates on mutual friends from my old school. During one such visit, he admitted, "Things are really tense at home now. Mom and Dad fight all the time, and she's always saying Aunt Patricia has poisoned you against us. But that's not what happened, is it?" "No," I said simply. "Aunt Patricia just gave me permission to acknowledge what was already happening. School became my sanctuary. Without the constant emotional drain of navigating life with Jennifer, I thrived academically and artistically. Ms. Reyes had connected me with the art teacher at my new school before I transferred, ensuring I had a supportive environment to continue developing my talent. By spring, I was entering local art competitions and beginning to think seriously about art schools after graduation. Aunt Patricia encouraged these ambitions without reservation, driving me to portfolio reviews and buying art books she thought might interest me. "Your mother always said you had an old soul," she told me one evening as we reviewed college brochures spread across her dining table. "She would have moved mountains to help you pursue your dreams, Allison. I'm just trying to do what she would have done." The statement hit me hard, reminding me of all my mother had missed. But it also strengthened my resolve to make choices that honored her memory and the values she had instilled in me during our too brief time together. As my 16th birthday approached, my father asked if he could plan a celebration. "Nothing elaborate," he promised. "Just something to show you I'm trying to do better." I agreed with caution, setting clear boundaries: no Jennifer, no Jack, and nothing that felt like an attempt to buy my forgiveness. He respected these terms, arranging a small dinner at my favorite restaurant with just himself, Thomas, Aunt Patricia, and Marissa, who had remained a steadfast friend despite the school change. It wasn't perfect. The conversation sometimes lapsed into awkward silences, and I could see the pain in my father's eyes when he realized how much he had missed of my life in just a few months. But it was a beginning, a tentative step toward whatever our relationship might become. As the school year ended, I faced a decision. My father and Jennifer had begun marriage counseling, and he reported that significant changes were being made in their home. Jennifer had been confronted with the reality of her behavior by both the therapist and, surprisingly, by Thomas, who had begun standing up to her when she made dismissive comments about me. "Would you consider coming home, Alley Cat?" my father asked during a weekend visit to Aunt Patricia's. "Not right away, but maybe before school starts again in fall. We could use the summer to ease into it." I looked at Aunt Patricia, who had become more mother than aunt to me. She squeezed my hand. "This is entirely your decision, Allison. Your home is with me for as long as you want or need it to be." The girl I had been before the cruise might have agreed immediately, desperate for any sign of her father's love and approval. But I wasn't that girl anymore. Months of therapy, Aunt Patricia's unwavering support, and my own hard-won insights had shown me my worth wasn't dependent on my father's recognition of it. "I need more time," I told him honestly. "I'm not ready to live under the same roof as Jennifer again. Maybe never." His face fell, but he nodded. "I understand, but I hope you know you'll always have a home with me whenever you're ready." That summer, I attended an intensive art program at a prestigious university, a trial run for the college experience that awaited me in 2 years. I flourished in the creative environment, making friends who shared my passion, and connecting with mentors who helped me envision a future where art wasn't just an escape, but a vocation. When I returned, I had made my decision. I would remain with Aunt Patricia through high school graduation, applying to colleges on the opposite coast. Not to punish my father, but because I had glimpsed a world beyond the painful dynamics of my blended family, and I was ready to claim it. "I'll support whatever you choose," my father said when I explained my plans. "Even if it takes you far away from me. I've learned the hard way that love means wanting what's best for you, not what's easiest for me." It was the first time since my mother's death that I felt he truly saw me, not as an extension of himself or an obligation to manage, but as an individual with my own path to follow. It wasn't forgiveness, not quite yet, but it was a step toward healing that I hadn't believed possible on that Christmas morning at Mrs. Wilson's house. As I prepared for my senior year, I reflected on the journey that had begun with that devastating exclusion from a family cruise. The pain had been real and terrible, but from it had emerged a stronger sense of self, an unwavering knowledge of my worth, and the courage to chart my own course. In my darkest moment, abandoned by those who should have cherished me most, I had found my voice. And now that voice would tell my story not as a victim, but as a creator of my own destiny. I'm Allison Campbell, now 32 years old, sitting in my art therapy studio in Boston on a snowy December afternoon. The teenager who was left behind for a Christmas cruise seems like another person. Sometimes a ghost I've carried with me through art school in California, graduate studies in New York, and finally to this peaceful space where I help other children find their voices through art. The journey from that devastating Christmas to where I am now wasn't linear or easy. There were setbacks and painful realizations, moments of doubt and flashes of the old hurt. But there was also growth, unexpected joy, and the gradual building of a life defined by my choices, rather than others' rejections. I remained with Aunt Patricia through high school, our bond deepening into something that transcended the traditional aunt-niece relationship. She became the mother figure I had lost, supporting me through college applications, first heartbreaks, and the inevitable identity crises of late adolescence. Her unconditional acceptance helped heal wounds that had seemed permanent. My relationship with my father evolved slowly. Regular therapy sessions, both individually and together, helped us address the damage done and establish healthier patterns. He finally divorced Jennifer during my sophomore year of college, a decision that came after years of attempting to repair a marriage that had been built on shaky foundations. "I should have chosen you," he admitted during one of his visits to California, where I was attending art school. Not just about the cruise, but 100 times before that. "I was so afraid of being alone after your mother died that I let someone else dictate how I treated my own daughter. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I understand what I did wrong." It took years, but eventually I did forgive him, not because he deserved it, but because carrying that anger was exhausting. We rebuilt something new, not the carefree father-daughter relationship of my early childhood, but a more mature connection based on honest communication and respect for boundaries. The twins took different paths. Jack remained aligned with his mother, rarely contacting me, except for occasional holiday messages that felt more obligatory than genuine. Thomas, however, made his own journey toward awareness. During my senior year of college, he visited me in California, bringing a letter he had written. "I was a coward," it read in part. "I knew how Mom treated you was wrong, but it was easier to go along with it than stand up to her. I'm sorry I didn't defend you when it mattered." Thomas and I developed a friendship in adulthood that would have seemed impossible during our teen years. He became a teacher working with disadvantaged youth, perhaps seeking to atone in some way for the privilege he had taken for granted. Jennifer faded from my life, appearing only as an occasional mention in updates from my father or Thomas. I heard she remarried a few years after the divorce, moving to Florida with her new husband. I felt nothing when I received this news, neither satisfaction nor resentment, which told me I had truly moved beyond her power to hurt me. Art remained my constant companion and savior. What began as an emotional outlet became my profession, my passion, and eventually my way of helping others. During graduate school for art therapy, I specialized in working with children who had experienced abandonment, neglect, or family trauma. My professors sometimes noted that I had an unusual insight into these children's emotional landscapes. If only they knew. I met David, my husband, at a gallery showing of my work in New York. He was a pediatrician attending with a mutual friend more interested in the artist than the art, as he later confessed. His steadfast nature and quiet strength reminded me of what my father could have been under different circumstances. When he proposed 2 years later, I hesitated, haunted by the specter of my father's failed marriage and the damage it had caused. I'm afraid of repeating patterns, I admitted to him one night, of trusting someone who might one day decide I'm not worth fighting for. Then we'll build new patterns, he promised, and I'll spend every day showing you that you are worth everything to me. Marriage to David brought another challenge, becoming a stepmother to his 2 children from a previous marriage. Lucy was 10, and Ben was 8 when we married their mother, having moved across the country for work, maintaining a loving but distant relationship with them. I was terrified of repeating Jennifer's mistakes, of making these children feel unwelcome or less worthy of love. "You're nothing like her," Aunt Patricia assured me when I confessed these fears. "The very fact that you're worried about this shows how different you are." She was right. My experience as the unwanted stepchild gave me a unique perspective that helped me build authentic connections with Lucy and Ben. I never tried to replace their mother, but I created space for them in my heart and our home that was entirely theirs. We developed our own traditions and inside jokes, a family narrative that included but wasn't defined by the complicated histories we all brought to it. Christmas remained complicated. For years, I couldn't enjoy the holiday without flashbacks to that devastating revelation about the cruise, the quiet morning at Mrs. Wilson's house, the knowledge that my family was celebrating without me. David understood, never pushing me to embrace traditional Christmas celebrations, instead helping me create new rituals that felt safe and meaningful. Gradually, December 25th became just another day on the calendar, neither dreaded nor particularly celebrated. Then Lucy asked if we could make Christmas cookies together using a recipe from her grandmother. Something about her hesitant request, the vulnerability in her eyes as she waited for my response, broke through the last of my resistance. "I'd love that," I said, and meant it. That year, we celebrated a small, intimate Christmas focused on togetherness rather than extravagance. Watching Lucy and Ben open the art supplies I had carefully selected for each of them, seeing their genuine excitement and appreciation, I felt something inside me shift and heal. My father joined us for Christmas the following year, his first visit to our home in Boston. He watched me with my stepchildren, his eyes often damp with what might have been regret or pride, or both. "You're an amazing mother, Alley Cat," he said quietly as we washed dishes after dinner. "You give them what I should have given you." "I learned from both the presence and absence of love," I replied, finding compassion for him that surprised me. "Mom showed me what good parenting looks like. You and Jennifer showed me what it shouldn't be. I needed both lessons to get here." He nodded, accepting this assessment without defensiveness. Age and consequences had humbled him in ways I once wouldn't have thought possible. 3 years ago, my father was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's, a cruel twist for a man still trying to make amends for past mistakes. During one of my visits to his assisted living facility, during a moment of unusual clarity, he brought up the cruise for the first time in many years. "That Christmas leaving you behind?" he said, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "It's my greatest regret. Not because it drove you away eventually, but because I knew it was wrong in the moment and did it anyway. I've spent 20 years trying to understand how I could have failed you so completely." "I know, Dad," I said, and I did. The angry teenager inside me had finally made peace with the imperfect man who had let fear and weakness override his better instincts. "I forgive you." His eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Forgiveness isn't about what you deserve," I told him, echoing words from my own therapist years earlier. "It's about what I need to move forward." He died 6 months later, peaceful and with family around him. Thomas came to the funeral standing beside me as we said goodbye to the complicated man who had connected and divided us. Jennifer sent flowers, but did not attend a decision that felt appropriate to the relationship she and my father had shared. Aunt Patricia, now in her 70s, but still vibrant and sharp, whispered to me at the reception afterward, "Kate would be so proud of the woman you've become, Allison." not despite the hardships, but because of how you've transformed them into compassion and wisdom. My mother's words from her deathbed came back to me then clear, as if she had just spoken them. Love never truly leaves. It just changes form. Perhaps this was what she meant. The love she had given me had changed form, becoming the strength that carried me through abandonment, the resilience that helped me build a new life, and the compassion that now allowed me to help others heal through art. In my therapy practice, I work primarily with children navigating complicated family dynamics. I don't share my personal history with them directly, but it informs every interaction, every careful response to their pain. When a 12-year-old girl shows me a drawing of herself standing alone while her family faces away from her, I understand in a way textbooks could never teach. Last week, this same girl created her first artwork, showing herself surrounded by supportive figures, some family, some not. "These are my people," she explained proudly, "the ones who see me. Being seen is powerful." I agreed, thinking of Aunt Patricia of David, of all the people who had truly seen me when I most needed it. Sometimes being left behind is the beginning of finding where you truly belong. My journey taught me that family isn't defined by blood or legal ties, but by consistent presence, by the courage to stand beside someone when it would be easier to walk away. It taught me that silence in the face of mistreatment isn't strength or maturity, but a survival mechanism that eventually needs to be replaced by a clear, unwavering voice. Most importantly, I learned that our worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it. The cabin might have been too nice to waste on me, but the life I've built is beautiful precisely because I now understand my value isn't dependent on anyone else's assessment. If you've ever been the one left behind, the one deemed not worth including, know this: that rejection says nothing about your worth and everything about the limitations of those who couldn't see your value. Your voice matters. Your presence matters. And somewhere, there are people waiting to welcome you home. Have you ever felt abandoned by someone who was supposed to protect you? How did you find your voice again? Share your story in the comments below and let others know they're not alone. Subscribe for more real-life stories and remember that sometimes the deepest wounds lead to the most profound healing. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always know your true worth regardless of who fails to see it.